Okay, I think we'll get started. Sounds like we've got lots of folks attending via Zoom, and what we would normally do, and we haven't held this agency staff training since 2018. We skipped it during the COVID session for a number of reasons. But what we usually do is we introduce ourselves, and then we have all the agency staff introduce themselves. But given that we're behind the 8 ball in terms of timing, and there's so many of you on Zoom, I think we'll skip the introductions of the agency staff at this point. But welcome to agency bill drafting. And you can kind of visualize us as a collective Hans and Franz. We're here to get you pumped up on bill drafting. And that's kind of our job. And we will introduce ourselves in terms of the presenters. I'm Todd Everts. I've been with the legislature for 31 years now. I've been through almost 16 regular sessions and what seems like hundreds of special sessions throughout the years. Been in this position for the last 10 years as the agency's chief legal counsel and co-commissioner. Prior to that, I was with the Environmental Quality Council, which is a legislative body, heading that shop up since 1995, and got a chance to interact with a lot of agency folks in DNRC, DEQ, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks over the years, and worked with them extensively on bill drafting. Jarrett, you want to chime in?
Sure. Thank you, Todd. My name is Jarrett Coles. I'm a Deputy Legal Director with Legislative Services Division and have been here for almost 13 years. So my experience is not nearly as large as Todd's is, but I was also in private practice doing great things like tax law before working for the legislature. So basically my areas of expertise are more in tax, but definitely looking forward to pumping you up, even though I don't think I can quite do that.
Susan.
Hi, my name is Susan Murray. I am the project manager for the Session Systems Replacement Project. I've only been here 6 years, so I apparently am the youngest of this group. And I am in charge of the bill drafting software that we use in-house, and so I'll do some of the macros that you guys will use as well. We'll go through those.
Okay, thank you guys. A couple of administrative matters. If you're an attorney, you do get CLE credits. If you're a Zoom attendee, email the bar number and your name to Jarrett Cole's email, which is posted up on the PowerPoint. For those of you here in the room, we've provided you with sustenance, a little coffee, cookies, a lot of sugar, keep you awake. For you guys on Zoom, tough luck. Handouts. Just want to explain the central cog in all this is our Bible for the Legislative Services Division and the legislative branch generally, and this is the Montana Bill Drafting Manual. We'll be referring to pieces of this, but by the way, this is an excellent read. It'll keep you just scintillated, jacked up when you read this thing. But I recommend that you do go through this. It has everything under the sun, and like I said, we'll be referring to it. We also provided you with kind of an organized sheet of handouts that includes the agenda today, and that's also accessible up on the web for those of you at Zoom. We also have evaluation sheets that we've posted, and we'd really appreciate your feedback after this in terms of how it went and whether it met your needs. So why do we offer this to state agency personnel? It's kind of a symbiotic relationship that we have with you guys, and kind of a quid pro quo. We are the bill drafting staff, and you'll be providing your drafts to us, and then we will take your draft and then put it into our system's format, and then make sure it adheres to our bill drafting standards. But it's great that you guys are actually drafting these bills ahead of time, because it provides us with a very efficient template of what it is that you want and what it is that you want to see in it. And you guys are the experts, the absolute experts in your area. And so we want to provide you with this training so that you can get it into a basic bill drafting format that we can take from you and get it done. And what that does is, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but all the agency bill drafts that you got passed through the interim committees, which I'm sure was a gauntlet, have to be pre-introduced before the session. And in order to do that, we need to get the information from you in that kind of format in terms of what you want. And then we need to get drafting on those. And another deadline that I'll be talking about later is the December 15th pre-introduction deadline to get these bills pre-introduced. So that primarily before the election that comes up, we don't get the flood of bill drafts from the legislators in, and we're busy working on your bill drafts. And then we try to get them off of our desks, and then get into pre-introduction, and then we can start really working on the flood that we get from those drafts. The reason I bring that up is we're here to assist you, again, to get your bill drafts through the process and do everything we can to ensure you get the pre-introduction. The symbiotic relationship I was talking about is, okay, we've given you some help, provided you cookies and coffee, for today, kind of a bribe. There are going to be times during the legislative session where we're flooded. We have close to 3,000 bill draft requests that all of our staff, are attempting to draft. And we'll be drafting, obviously, bill drafts in your area of expertise. And we'll be giving you a call to say, hey, look, we need to understand how to put this into law in order to make sure that you guys can implement it. And we're not going to be asking you for your opinion, because you guys will be able to come in after the fact and express your opinion. All we're looking for from you guys is not whether it's a good or bad idea, it's whether we can make it work for you guys. And we rely on you heavily at times, for that kind of advice. So that's the kind of the relationship that we try to build up with you guys, and kind of quid pro quo. So training topics today, going to kind of go over the art and science of bill drafting. I'll kind of give an overview on that. Jarrett's going to do constitutional legal considerations. I'll do an overview of the legal review note process that we go through. Bill drafting and technical rules, Jarrett's going to take. Autonomy of the bill, Jarrett. Drafting aid and tools, me. The bill drafting macros, Susan Murray. Tips on Montana code annotated on folio, Jarrett. And then also we'll go through the legislative branch website, and then I'll finish up with agency deadlines. Really, our training goals here today are expose you to the basics of bill drafting. and really point out the existing resources that can help make your job easier when you're drafting the bill. And also to point out that, you know, you're not hanging out there on an island. We're here to, you know, help support you guys in terms of drafting that bill, and just provide some practical tips that will hopefully make the process somewhat less painful and a little bit more efficient. So before I dive into the art of and science of bill drafting, I kind of want to put a question out there in terms of how you might, or how you guys view the legislative session. Do you view the session as kind of a shark, you know, ready to gobble you up and spit you out, maybe chew on you for quite a long time? Or do you view it as kind of this sweet golden setter named Charlie that's cuddly, harmless, that you like to spend a lot of time with? You know, most all the agencies have kind of that shark mentality, you know, going into it, and almost a bunker mentality, you know, going into the session, and that's understandable. But let me tell you that you got to modify that view. And here's why: because you'll achieve a lot more if you treat it as the cuddly Charlie as opposed to the shark. Our role as nonpartisan staff, especially in this political environment, is to provide our legislators with the best factual information possible. We provide them with options. We absolutely do not have an opinion, you know, on those options. We provide them with legal advice on potential issues that are coming up. And we approach it when we sit down and talk to a legislator about a bill draft. And I know you guys are dealing with your bill drafts, but you got to talk to the legislators, you know, about your bill drafts, is that we're there for them, and we're there to ensure that they're not blindsided about any issue that comes up within that bill draft. And we're going to do everything that we can, and we're going to tell them, you know, this issue may potentially come up. We're not expressing an opinion either way. Here's an options on how to deal with it. Okay, that's our role as nonpartisan staff for the legislature. You guys, on the other hand, have to advocate, you know, for your policy positions, and you even have your staff up there lobbying, you know, for the legislature. And so the environment, which especially has become much more political and unforgiving over these years, and I've been at this, like I said, for 31 years now, makes it so that when you guys are coming up with this legislation, it's all about trust, developing that trust with the legislator, having their back, being upfront on, you know, what the bill does, what the issues are, and communication and building a relationship. Back in the day, the legislative institution didn't have term limits, okay? It was an institutional power. And the reason it was an institutional power was all those long-term legislators had the ability to develop relationships with you guys in the agencies. That doesn't happen anymore. The turnover rate in the legislature has just been massive you know, in terms of the institutional knowledge and ability. And you have those legislators coming in distrusting, you know, the bureaucrats, us and you. And it's incumbent on all of us to earn that trust. And I know that some of your agencies have actually been very proactive about this and have been going out and meeting with legislators, talking about, you know, upcoming policy proposals, answering questions, that kind of thing, walking a mile in their shoes. And that's a good thing for you guys that have done that. But this is your chance, especially and the bill drafting process is really our chance to interact with new legislators for the first time, but it's also your chance as well. So that's why Charlie is such a beautiful image. And I know that you have PTSD on the shark and it'll be there, but I just want you to know that you know, building those relationships and trusts will get you so much further along. I mean, drafting the bill is just the first part of it. It's just getting it, you know, getting it through and achieving your goals. So art and science of bill drafting. I'm not going to read this in quote entirely, but you get the gist of it. Poorly drafted statutes are a burden upon the entire state. Judges struggle to interpret them and apply them. Attorneys find it difficult to base any sure advice upon them. Citizens get confused. Bad bill drafting has serious consequences. I mean, huge consequences. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about the art and science of bill drafting? It's an art in the collective sense that we use our minds and technology to draft law that exercises the will of the people of the state of Montana. It's a science in the sense of the precision. This is the precision. Word choice, grammar, structure, logic, all these things that we'll be talking about. In many ways, it's the ultimate form of public service, I think. But let's go to the next slide, Jared. Let's talk about drafting the law and the purest form of practicing the law. I'm biased. I've been doing this for a long time. I view this as the purest form of practicing law, and not implementing the law in the executive, not interpreting the law in the judiciary, but actually enacting the law. And when you take a look at it, and we've decided to put out some of our Grizz cat, Bobcat. I'm an Oregon duck. We've got what was this? Oh, the Carroll College. Yeah, Carroll College code books here. Take a look at it. But when you look, and I know you guys heard this spiel last time if you were here in 2018. When you take a look at these code books, every aspect of our lives is governed by these. And I used the example of when I get up and in the morning, turn on the shower, both the quantity and quality of that water is regulated. When I go to turn on the coffee pot and the electricity comes through, regulated. When I step out on the sidewalk to go to my car, the dimensions of that sidewalk, the spacing, everything regulated. When I hop into the car, turn it on, everything about that car, the road in which it's on, the traffic lights, everything to get me up here to the Capitol is regulated. You get in here, as I mentioned last time, you look at the capacity in this room is 84. Right here, right there. So when we're drafting these bills and you guys get to be an awesome part of this, it's a huge responsibility. Huge responsibility to undertake, but also a privilege in doing this. Is there a perfect bill? Can it ever be achieved? The editors who are the gospel in terms of making sure that all of our staff adheres to this book would say that Todd Everts has never achieved a perfect bill draft, ever, probably. It's a lofty goal, but what makes a perfect bill draft? It's legal, it's clear, it's concise, it's precise, it's direct, it's unambiguous, it's coherent, it's unifying, it's understandable by a person with no special knowledge of the subject. Could never be misinterpreted, doesn't conflict with any law, and would never be litigated. That is perfection. Absolute perfection. In terms of what you're trying to achieve in terms of being precise and clear in a bill draft, you know, kind of while striving to be unstilted, you know, you'd be clear and natural in expression, but you got to avoid being conversational, because in a conversation, the speaker reserves the right to explain what is meant. The drafter doesn't have that ability, and is granted no such right with that. And let me talk about the importance of word choice and grammar. And so we had back in, I think, like 2000, we had this speaker, Speaker Dan McGee, out of Laurel, Billings. And he spent 20 minutes on the House floor talking about a comma placement. 20 minutes. And he was right to do that, actually. And here's the example. I'll give you a couple examples. Let's eat, comma, grandma. Or let's eat grandma. That comma is a difference between you eating grandma and eating with grandma. We've got another example, the famous panda example. A panda enters the cafe, he orders a sandwich, eats it, then pulls out a squirt gun and starts shooting. When the waiter demands an explanation for the panda's unusual behavior, fortunately no one was hurt, the panda hands him a poorly punctuated wildlife guide booklet. And the waiter is asked to look up the description of a panda. It reads, panda, large black and white bear-like mammal, native to China, eats, shoots, and leaves. So I hope those two examples highlight the absolute critical importance of the precision of bill drafting. Let's see, what else? I think that's it. Jared, I think I'll pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Todd. I listened to Todd teach this in 2018, trying to prepare for this one, and it sounded just like 2018. So I think he's been doing it for about 30 years. But
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was striking. I'm going to cover legal and constitutional considerations, and obviously not all constitutional considerations. We're just going to kind of highlight some of the big things that you should look for in bill drafts. There's a lot of them, but we can't cover everything. In your packet, you're going to find, and in the bill drafting manual itself, there's a lot of great information, obviously. But when we draft bills in legislative services, it doesn't matter if we've drafted one bill or 1,000 bills. We all have to complete the bill drafting checklist. And if we don't, the bill gets sent back to us and we get a big nasty comment from Todd about not following the bill drafting checklist. And so that's actually in the bill drafting manual, but to make it simple, I also put it in the bill drafting materials that you have, which is about the 36 something pages of materials with a date stamp page number in the lower right-hand corner. On that, if you were to turn to page 9, if you're in the room, and I'll show you where it's at on here, just so you have an idea what we're looking at. Let's see. So this is the bill drafting checklist. And some of the items that I'm going to be going over in the legal and constitutional review are because of not only the bill drafting checklist, but obviously because we have a duty to do that. But one of the first things and the most important thing is, number one, conformity with both the state and the federal constitution. And then there's always a cross-reference to the portion of the bill drafting manual that gets into more detail on this in case you have questions about that. But in agency bill drafting, I would recommend that you do this for every single bill that you draft, because it really is an effective process and has worked for us since probably the beginning. Another thing that deals with legal and constitutional aspects is number 2, and then number 3 and number 4. And I'm going to go through those now, and then I won't be going through this checklist specifically, but it's definitely something to keep in mind during the drafting process. So that gets us back to here. They did update our bill drafting manual, so I noticed this slide was a little off. It's actually not Appendix R in the top here, it's Appendix Q that we were just looking at. So the first thing, federal law. The legislature is restrained by the US Constitution, we're restrained by federal statutes, and of course the Montana Constitution. Those are really the only restraints, but of course there's a lot of material in those various documents. Federal law, it's one of those things that's a big deal. Supremacy clause issues, and of course preemption issues. So the state cannot obviously supersede a federal law. Todd had a bill once. He uses this all the time as an example, so I might as well use it. In the early 2000s, there was a bill that eliminated the Federal Invasive Species Act somehow. Endangered, there we go. Invasive, endangered. Anyway, it dealt with federal law, and it was a fiscal impact of about $39 million for that. So
I've got the record as a bill drafter for a fiscal note.
I don't know. I think there was another person that had one in the billion range once, eliminating something along those lines. But anyway, so besides fiscal consequences, you always have to, and it's tough too, because if you don't know every aspect of federal law and you're drafting in an area, you sometimes have some research to do to make sure that you're not trying to preempt something that you can't preempt. And so that takes a lot of research, but usually when you're drafting in your subject area, you know a lot of those things. And so it helps out. We often get asked, how can you draft a bill? That's clearly unconstitutional. Well, we're not judges, and the legislature has the ability to do whatever they want to do. I mean, that's their job, is to introduce legislation. And so as nonpartisan drafters, we don't question that. We will, however, advise of potential legal issues when we see them. And then if there's a way we can draft around those issues, we will certainly do that if the legislature desires to do that. Todd will get into a thing called the legal review note process later on in this presentation for those situations where we couldn't figure out how to draft around a potential issue. But again, only the courts can decide whether something is unconstitutional or not. We just give our best advice. Todd will go through a legal review note that we had on marijuana law. Whenever there's a marijuana law, we always raise a potential legal issue because marijuana is illegal at the federal level, and here we are at the state regulating it. So you'll always see that regardless. And those bills usually go forward regardless of what that says. There's also federal constitutional protections on religion and speech and equal protection and due process. Obviously, all those things apply as well to the state of Montana, and we can't have legislation that goes against those federal issues. Looking at that checklist, remember we also had conformity with the state constitution. So, you know, it's always advised to us as staff of legislative services to review the entire state constitution before each session. And, you know, that's really a good practice, but when you're drafting, there are key provisions definitely to look at, though, if you don't have time to look at the whole document. And most of them are in Article 5. Article 5 deals with the legislative branch and the powers that the legislative branch has and the restrictions imposed on the legislative branch. Most particularly, I'm not going to bring it up because I'm not that tech savvy, but if I was, I would bring up Article 5, Section 11. Article 5, Section 11 deals specifically with bills. So since we're in a bill drafting workshop, it's probably pretty relevant, which it definitely is. The subsection 1 of that provision says a law shall be passed by bill which shall not be altered or amended on its passage through the legislature as to change its original purpose. So the original purpose, that becomes very important. And when was the original purpose determined? If a bill exceeds the original purpose, it will get thrown out. And so we always pay particular attention to the first line of the title. The first line of the title should encompass everything that the bill does and give the public enough notice of what's going on in the bill so that they can be aware of what's in the bill. Sometimes you get bills that go over a wide variety of subject area in your particular area. So you could have a tax bill and it's revising the entire income tax code or touching upon a lot of aspects of the income tax code. In that situation, there's really no way to craft a title that says everything that bill does. And I'm thinking of Senate Bill 399, which was last session and did revise the entire income tax code without saying generally revising. And I'll show why we use that term when we get into it. Of course, there are some things you have to be careful with because from just a perspective of an agency bill drafter, if you have a title that's really wide, like general revised income tax, a member of the legislature has the absolute right to amend or attempt to amend that bill to anything that they desire dealing with income tax. And that could happen. It could strike everything that you had in the bill because the title was broad enough, and it could cover with other aspects of income tax. And so it's kind of that delicate balance of determining, do you want to have a wide title that gets stuff in, or do you want to have a much narrower title to where something couldn't happen, like an act revising sidewalk laws, as opposed to, you know, to be more specific. Of course, if you do that, then you also run the risk of not having enough flexibility when you get into the legislative session for your bill to do anything. Also, the legislature can completely disregard what you said in the first line of the title if they desire. It's their absolute right. We just give advice on that. I remember drafting a bill once that said it was changing the time frame for alcohol from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. for sales of, I think it was hard alcohol. And the committee took that, struck the first line, amended it, and the bill died. So, I mean, they can still do what they're going to do, but that's the way to really think about when you're drafting. There is a 2-year statute of limitations in Section 11, Article 5, Section 11. So if you do have a bill that gets challenged, it has to get challenged within that 2-year time frame. So sometimes I'll calendar those, maybe not, but it's there was a few when I started out that I was definitely watching them until that 2-year time frame ran, just to make sure. Article 5, Section 11, again, subsection 3 on this one. This is each bill except general appropriation bills and bills for the codification and general revision of the laws, which is Todd, the co-commissioner bill, shall contain only one subject clearly expressed in the title. So I couldn't have a bill generally revising income tax laws and forest laws. You're covering 2 totally different areas. That would not be a single subject bill. The General Appropriations Act, which some of you may know, has mostly just money. That's all it should be in there is money. Appropriations for operation of state government. Covers every facet of government you can imagine, from health and welfare to parks, but all it's dealing with is appropriations of money. If there's a provision placed in an appropriation bill that deals with more than money, like an attempted amendment to a statute, then it's violating this section. What that does is if you do put something in an appropriation bill that's substantive, The governor actually has the authority to strike it out as a rider that's not supposed to be in the Appropriations Act. This happened as a challenge, I believe, in around 2007 during the Schweitzer administration, where House Bill 2 had a lot of things in it besides just appropriations. Also, when you can have a single subject appropriation bill, we call those cat and dog bills. On those bills, you can put money in to the bill, the legislature can. It would have to be introduced in the House because only the House can hear appropriation bills under our rules. And in those situations, the appropriation has to relate to a single subject. It has to relate, like if it's a bill to regarding forest regulation, it has to specifically relate to that forest regulation in that bill. And so those are some of the parameters. You can't draft a bill that has all kinds of things. We're not like Congress at the US, so we can't do that. Next thing to touch base on, maybe subsection 5. So again, Article 5, Section 11, subsection 5. No appropriation shall be made for religious, charitable, and industrial, educational, or benevolent purposes to any private individual, private association, or private corporation under control of the state. So the legislature cannot appropriate money to private individual or a corporation. There are ways around this, but it gets more specific, like doing grants and having a grant program that's run by an agency and the agency actually controls the funds. But you can't just have money that goes directly to a private individual. There are ways that legislation can get around some of that stuff, like with tax credits, Tony, but I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, that's a big one. The next one, Article 5, Section 12. This is dealing with local and special legislation. The legislature shall not pass a special or local act when a general act is or can be made applicable. So a bill draft that prohibits either red dogs or that cute golden retriever from entering the Capitol would be special legislation because it doesn't deal with the purple dogs, and you could have had it deal with the purple dogs as well. Todd, if you're on the spot for this, you had your deregulation case, which I thought was an excellent example, and I'll probably get the Columbia River Basin mixed up with the Missouri River Basin. I don't know if you wouldn't mind talking about that.
Yeah, I was here back in the ancient age of deregulation of the electric utilities back in the day. And I was instructed to put in a provision that would exempt Montana Dakota utilities from the deregulation provisions. And I did that by describing the service area of Northwestern Energy to try to get around special legislation. And it stood the test of time for quite a bit of time until this last year, when a district court took a look at it and struck down actually the Restructuring Act statutes for electric regulation down on special legislation based on that provision that was put into law. So we've had workarounds in the past that we thought we'd been able to do, but you just got to be very careful about how you apply it and that kind of thing.
Thanks, Todd. I guess the next thing I'll get to, and we'll wrap this section up here in a second and go back to Todd, but we're going to keep going through that checklist that I showed you. Items 2 and 3 dealing with internal consistency in the MCA. When we get into just walking through the folio program that we have, we're going to show you what exactly this means. But if you were to amend a subsection in a bill completely out of a bill, like subsection 3 of a specific section, fortunately, the folio software will show you every single statute in the Montana Code that has that particular section in it. And so part of what we do is go through with the folio, and you can do it fairly rapidly and go through and make sure that that subsection that you just deleted from your draft is not somewhere else in code. If it is, then we have to bring in that code provision as well and amend it. And we're going to go through that in some more detail. But why this is a legal consideration is if you fail to do that and there's a subsection hanging out there that has legal consequences, and it's not just to help the reader get to a specific area, it can have a dramatic legal consequence for something that you didn't intend. And so That's why it's so important and it's on the checklist. Item 16 on the checklist deals with the power for rulemaking. Whenever the legislature confers rulemaking on an agency, it places in the title, especially with new rulemaking authority, that it's providing rulemaking authority. We'll go through the things that have to be in a title later on here today, and things that don't necessarily have to be in the title. Providing rulemaking authority, if it's new rulemaking authority, is one of those things that we do. It's obviously, it's separation of powers is one of those big things that comes into rulemaking authority. There's that fine balance of making sure that you're giving the agency enough information so they can actually enforce and make laws, or sorry, rules, and making sure that they know what they're supposed to do without over delegating rulemaking authority. So when we go through and we give rulemaking authority to agencies as drafters on behalf of the legislature, we attempt to make sure that the provisions of the statutes are sufficiently clear, definite, and certain to enable the agency to know what its rights and obligations are. There was a case back a long time ago, 1979. It was the Gates City Savings and Loan Association case. And in this particular case, there was a code section that directed the Department of Business Regulation, which is now the Department of Labor, to rule on merger applications by savings and loan associations. But there was nothing else in there. It didn't provide any standards or guidelines, either expressed or otherwise ascertainable, for the agency to determine what it was to do, and that was declared an unconstitutional delegation. So it's also, you probably see it once in a while in agencies. It's that tug of war with the interim committees that we just got out of. Now that interim is officially done as of today in our minds, and we're getting ready for session. But that's why there's the checks and balances with the interim committees reviewing agency proposals for rulemaking. Todd, that's all I have on the constitutional considerations. I didn't go through the quote by Justice Marshall because it's in front of you, but that's all I have.
Okay. Thanks, Jared. If you go to page 6 of your handouts, that shows this Legislative Services Division bill drafting process. I just want to touch base with you on this. Oh, that's the committee process there, Jared. Because of the legal review note process. And I just want to show you what's happening to your bill draft when it comes in to our system, and all the steps that it takes that your little bill draft that can make it through the little LSD choo-choo train and get through the process. And there's a lot of steps, and there's a lot of eyes on this. That doesn't mean that we miss stuff, because we do, just because of the sheer volume that we have going through our process. But one of those steps is that I get the privilege, thankless job of reading every single bill that comes through the legislature that's drafted to be introduced. And what I do is do a legal review of those bills coming through, and I'm looking for potential legal issues. And Jared talked about some of them that I'm looking for, but I and my legal staff actually have generated legal review checklists within their subject matter areas, which I rely on because in my old age I get forgetful. And we utilize those checklists, Jarrett within tax, Laura within education, that kind of thing, that I utilize when I'm taking a look at your bill. And I'm required to do that by law. I'm required in law to legally review all legislation. And why would the law require me and my staff to do that. Enacting law, like I said, is the core function of the legislature. It's constitutionally based. We have all these laws coming in, and we have to ensure to our best abilities that they don't conflict with other statutes, that they're constitutional in nature, if we can make them work. And so that's, and then also that we're not creating conflicts, duplication, confusion, within the drafting of all these laws. So that's why we're required to do this. So back in 2013, we instituted a legal review note process that made this legal review a lot more transparent. And we actually patterned it after another state legislature, the Utah legislature. And if there is a potential constitutional issue with a bill, and it's a very, very high standard to trigger this legal review note process, there has to be a Montana Supreme Court case directly on point with the language in the statute, or jurisdictionally relevant federal court case specifically on point. Or there's actually just a direct language conflict between what's in the statute and the Montana Constitution, for example. That's it. And it's a high threshold to meet. And I can tell you that since we've instituted this, it's put me in the crosshairs from all sides of the political spectrum. But again, I'm required by law to provide the legislature with information regarding the legality of these bills. And I get attacked even more for not issuing these bill drafts, these legal review notes. And that's due to the high standard. And what I tell people is, look, it doesn't mean that, this bill is constitutional or not. That's going to be decided in a court. It's just the threshold standard we have to meet. And you've got the language in your handout on page 7. Is kind of the caveat statement that we have in front of these legal review notes. They're not an opinion. It's not dispositive, and that legislation is presumed constitutional. These legal review notes are not full-fledged opinions. And you'll notice that they're articulated extremely precisely. We're not issuing an opinion on whether it is unconstitutional or not. We're just saying that it meets our threshold requirements, and there may be a potential constitutional issue. And so I've been an equal opportunity legal note applier across the spectrum since 2013. Republicans and Democrats alike, even prior governors' administrations have received legal review notes from our office. We're not out for a getcha or gotcha. We're just putting everybody on notice that there may be a potential issue here, and that needs to be out there so that the legislature isn't blindsided, about these issues. And so that's kind of the legal review note process that I wanted to talk about. Yeah. Can you use the microphone? use the microphone.
There's a button on the bottom that you can push.
Okay, so the example you gave isn't a situation where where you're saying that it's unconstitutional under the Montana Constitution.
Yeah.
This marijuana act,
Mhm.
but in a situation where that's what your note said, is there any additional process that would occur if you are, I mean, do you just issue this note and then that's all? Or if you are stating that it's clearly unconstitutional from your opinion, is there a different process then that occurs with this bill?
And restate the question the question is whether if this was dealing with the Montana Constitution as an issue on a legal review note, and we're expressing not our opinion, we're just stating that there may be potential constitutional conformity issues. And I want to stress that because we're not saying that it is or not. And it's only because it meets our threshold requirements to trigger it. Is there another process that occurs after this happens? So we go through an extensive process to try to not issue these legal review notes with the requesting legislator and agency. You know, we tried to work with past administrations, on this. And we try to find workarounds from a drafting perspective, but more and more, the legislature wants to test the boundaries of what has been found to be, unconstitutional in the past, and it's their right to do that, with the changing landscape. And so all this does is just say, hey, legislators at large, we've identified a potential issue, here. It's up to you on whether you want to pass this legislation or not. And it comes into play in the committees. The committees want copies of these. And I would say that the legislature has a joint rule in place regarding the publication of these on the web, that it's up to the requester of the legislation, if they receive one of these, whether they want it posted up on the web or not. And if they say post it up on the web, we do. If they don't, then I just have these in a file, electronic file, and I get a whole list of folks, especially from the press and the administration, that say, put me on the list, and legislators as well. And when you issue a legal review note, please send me a copy of it because it's a public document. I would also note that another part of this is that when we make the decision to issue this legal review note, we also provide a portion. You'll see requester comments at the end of this legal review note, and it's a rebuttal section that the requester can put in there, and they do. May have disagreements, on the court cases used for that kind of thing, and that allows them an opportunity to have that published and be there side by side with a legal review note. But there isn't anything that will stop, nor should it, the legislature from making a decision. All we want and all we're required to do is ensure that they, again, aren't blindsided. They go in with their eyes wide open, that there's a potential risk of nullifying their bill in a court of law. And they need to understand that. And if they still want to do it, and they definitely do want to do it a lot of the time, with their eyes wide open, knowing that it's out there, that's the legislative process. So. Question? Yeah. Anita.
Yes, thank you. Along those lines, is there any particular staff member or particular expertise on the part of staff in reviewing constitutional issues, or is it sort of a vote of the group, majority vote to determine to move forward, or how does that work?
What I do, and it's worked really well, is the attorney who's in the subject matter area, who's the subject matter area expert, tax, for example, they either identify the legal issue in their drafting of their bills, or we have researchers that also draft them, all identify them. And then I get together with the subject matter attorney and work with them, and they actually do primarily a number of the drafting of the legal review notes. And then I'm a part of that. And then that's how we determine it. And like I said, I have, and we can provide them to you. I have my attorneys update kind of our legal review checklists within subject matter areas that I use as a reference point in issue spotting. And I'd be happy to provide those to you. They've got to date them for this time around. So once we update them, I can send those to you. And that's kind of the backdrop that we use. And again, the threshold is high. It's got to be a Montana Supreme Court opinion that's directly on point, on the language, or a jurisdictionally relevant, federal court decision or the U.S. Supreme Court decision, in terms of, making that determination.
Looks like we have one in the back too. And if you could walk up to the mic and turn on the mic, or we can repeat the question too if you want.
Do the legal review notes have any evidentiary value if there's a subsequent challenge to the law? Are they admissible into evidence, or?
They have been used in some of the briefs, before the courts. So, yes.
Thank you.
I don't know if I should say this now, Todd. I don't know if we said it in the beginning, but we do have a remote meeting coordinator. So if anyone's online as well that desires to ask a question, you can always raise your hand and the remote meeting coordinator can get you in the room. Okay, we'll get off the subject of legal review notes and get to something way more exciting like the bill drafting manual. So for those of you that are online that don't have the picture, we get a new color every year for these. Sometimes they put something on the back that's humorous. This time they neglected to do that. Once it had a camel, I don't know. But this is the bill drafting manual. You'll have it online. I actually like the bill drafting manual online for a lot of respects because you can do a search and the search comes up with a lot of stuff. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the bill drafting manual and this slide of my golden doodle, because that's better to look at than the bill drafting manual. Maybe I'll get this on the back of the bill drafting manual at some point in time. But what we're going to do is we're going to really do a cursory look at the bill drafting manual. When you're drafting, it's kind of one of those things that's referenced with a really nice table of contents, and you can usually find what you're looking for by looking at the table of contents and going through it. It's an issue spotting thing. So what we're going to do is just basically do some issue spotting. We're going to open the bill drafting manual because we're in a bill drafting course and we want to make sure that you know what's in it. The things that we're going to focus on this slide is basically chapters 2 and 3 of the bill drafting manual. Some fantastic material. I want to make sure I cover everything on the PowerPoint. And so I'm going to see if I can multitask here. If we go, I should have the bill drafting manual up here. Here's chapter 2. It's dealing with style and language. The first one to look at is 2-2. And this is dealing with word choice. It's basically telling you to be precise and clear. And since we have about 15 minutes to get through this section, I'm going to really highlight some stuff as opposed to digging deep and try to figure out what's there, and just so you know what's there. We use the present tense, not the past tense. That's in 2-3. One thing that you'll find that's really fun is when you get back a draft sometimes, we have our editors especially are really particular on shall, must, and may. We have pages of material on shall, must, and may. And it's always that interesting debate with legislators when drafting bills for them, and it gets changed. And our editors will not let something go out if it doesn't comply with 2-4. Our editors are fanatic about that. And so 2-4 is a huge rule that we follow on shall, must, and may. And really, if you read it when you have a situation like that, this is a really good, there's examples of what's preferred. The judge must receive the application by the deadline. Avoid the judge shall receive the application by the deadline. It all deals with whether the subject is a thing rather than a person. And again, I could go into this ad nauseum, but just know that it's there. And if you're using those terms, to be aware of that. And then may not is what we use for prohibition. So that's shall, must, and may. If we go into 2-6 of the bill drafting manual, this talks about it's preferable to draft in the active voice. And there's, of course, an example of the active voice. The next one is singular numbers. We try to use singular numbers instead of plural numbers whenever possible. According to the statute, singular includes the plural, so you don't need to use the plural. And so there's an example, a defendant in a civil action versus defendants in a civil action. I know this is exciting stuff, but we'll keep going. 2-12. Oh, and gender, this is a good one to cover. You don't see it as much in drafting these days. Everyone's really, we've cleaned up our code a lot over the years. There was a bill one session before I got here. I don't know how big that bill was, but the code commissioner had it, and it was probably thousands of pages to clean up gender references in the code. So it was a very big bill. There's some examples in the bill drafting manual about terms that are the old terms and what are the gender neutral terms. So, like dairyman would be dairy producer, etc. You get the drift. There's pages and pages and pages of this stuff. Okay, so now, let's see. Be consistent with use. This is a good one, 2-12. So if you're drafting something and you use the term worker, don't later on try to come up with some other term like employee. Make sure that the same person is the same person, or the same task is the same task. And it's hard when you're drafting, but it's just, it makes sense. That or which. This was one of those things that they wanted us to talk about, so we will. The word that begins a restrictive clause that restricts, limits, or describes the word modified and is necessary to the meaning of the sentence. The clause is essential rather than parenthetical, so commas are not used. However, you can see in the bottom example where the word which begins a non-restrictive clause, and it does not restrict the words modified, and it gives additional supplemental information, which is why you see the difference in the commas. This is, again, a lot of this is just issue spotting. You're not going to remember all this stuff, but it's there. So going to the next. Citations, 2-20. If you're curious about how to cite particular things, the bill drafting manual gets into that in depth. And there's a lot of stuff here. Citations. So here you will see how you cite stuff within the MCA itself, how you cite to specific Montana code provisions, how you cite to the Montana Constitution, how you cite to the United States Constitution, how you cite to session law, various rules. Rules took me a long time to figure out because of the way that we cite to those in Montana. federal materials, and then any miscellaneous materials. Next thing I'm going to go on to is chapter 3. This is dealing with form and capitalization. This is really interesting when you start drafting. There's a lot of stuff we don't capitalize in Montana because it's not necessary for the purposes of making it a legal draft. We always capitalize the first word in the sentence, months and days, and honestly, there's things like that you would think would be capitalized that we don't capitalize. I'll see if we can get an example of it. Like governor is not capitalized, names of departments are not capitalized. Pretty much most things are not capitalized. And so, but this will show you the things that are capitalized. Like here's the example of not to capitalize Department of Administration. We do still capitalize Code Commissioner. Kidding? No, we don't. We took all those out. Todd put them in, but those are back to lowercase. So right. The editors caught right onto that one. So though we can't do that. Punctuation. This is about the use of a comma and how Todd talked about, the 20 minutes of discussion on a comma. It talks about the two independent clauses versus a subject and a predicate and when to use the comma. I'm not going to go into that, but there's great examples of comma usage. And I did watch the last bill drafting presentation, and we didn't go into ad nauseum in the bill drafting manual, which is why I thought we need to at least touch on it this time around. 3-4. We'll get there. We need a quick abbreviations and acronyms, numbers. This is a hard one to get your head around, but if it's numbers 1 through 9, we spell it out. If it's greater than 9, we don't. This is reminding people of the blue book back in law school, if you had that. Then we got measurements in here. I mean, the editors just love this stuff. It goes forever, but it's our job as bill drafters to look this stuff up when we know it's going to happen and make sure that we're drafting it correctly. Next thing we'll get into is how to amend text. Susan Murray's going to go through a macro for you and show you how to amend text in the macro. But basically, we always strike before we underline. That's really important. And then there's times that this is me beginning drafting and probably still today. And that last one, the information contained, strike in the certificate, strike is not, strike be an, a. You can get around that by actually striking a lot of stuff and just retyping it without doing that much of a, and it makes it really hard when you're codifying and explaining what the legislature did when you have it so choppy. So that's a great example there. There's a page. See, I think this is the last thing before I hand it back over to you, Todd. We've got to talk a little bit about internal references and references to the MCA. And we're going to cover this more in folio. So I'm not going to touch on it for a long time. But on page 10 of your handout, there is a listing of what internal references are. And basically what it says is if you strike something, you need to make sure that it's not referred to somewhere else in the MCA. So in the checklist on page 10 of your handout, I'm not going to open it up because I'm not that proficient, but it goes through and it basically reminds you, hey, if you repeal a section of law, you need to check everywhere else in the MCA to make sure that that section of law is stricken as well, because we can have reference to a repealed section in the MCA. And it's the same thing like I was talking about when you have a subsection reference that's renumbered or changed, we need to continually check through the MCA to make sure. We also, especially with definition sections, if we rename a definition, we need to know when we're striking terms in a part or a chapter, et cetera, whether that term is a defined term. And if we strike a term, we need to look in other areas, and the folio will show you how this works. We need to look and make sure that that term is still used, because we never want a defined term in the MCA that's not being used. And so that's really what that handout and that cheat sheet gets to. So I'd recommend that you take a look at that. But based on time, it looks like I get to do the next section too. I'm going to speed it along a little bit here. This is the anatomy of a bill. We got to go away from the golden doodle now. So we're going to go, and I can hit this one in about 5 minutes, I think. This is about bill arrangement and mandatory and non-mandatory provisions, codified and non-codified, effective dates and things of that nature. There's a handout on page 14 of your materials. It's a good handout. Get that up on the screen. This goes through the parts of the bill. So again, I'm going to kind of go through this quickly, but there's parts of the bill that are mandatory and there's parts of the bill that are non-mandatory. And where would you think this stuff would all show up? It's in the bill drafting manual. So if we go to chapter 4 of the bill drafting manual, this gets in so much detail, and it's a really big chapter about every single section you could think of in the bill drafting manual, all laid out there for you. So in addition to the nice cheat sheet that you have as well. The bill drafting manual will tell you what is a required section in the bill. In other words, it's not going to be a legal draft without these sections. You'll see that this little asterisk in 4-2 of the bill drafting manual says that it's required. So you need to have the bill identification. When we start drafting a bill, it gets what's called an LC number. I think it was referred to as legislative council number back in the day. It's basically just a number we randomly assign chronologically to all drafts as they get entered into the system. Once that bill is introduced, then it gets either a House bill number or a Senate bill number, and the LC number pretty much becomes a lot less important except for research purposes. You need to have the sponsor line, so who the sponsor of the draft is. Agencies will have, if you went through an interim committee and the interim committee said you could go ahead and have a member of our staff draft the bill, you'll get a by request line, so by request of the agency. If you didn't go through an interim committee, then you don't get that by request line. And so that's kind of in addition to all the other things that pre-introduction does for us as staff and for everyone else, you also get a listing of where that bill came from. A title. Title is like one of the most important things ever. We have a special slide for it that I don't think we're going to be able to get to. The first line we discussed a lot and how important that is. The title's required. The title should encompass everything your bill does, so a member of the public can read the title, know what's in the bill. The title also has every amended section in it and also has every repealed section in it. And then it has things in it that are determined to be in the title, which I have another thing I think I'll hit later that shows you what exactly needs to be in the title. But if you're appropriating money, an appropriation needs to be in the title. If you're doing what's called an unfunded mandate, so if the legislature just determines to make the local government do something that they don't have the money to do, that they don't have to normally do as part of their duties, that goes in the title. So there's various things that go in the title. Title is required though. Preambles, you see those once in a while, those are not required. Enacting clauses, a bill has to have an enacting clause. It has to say that the legislature is enacting. And then the body, and the body is the big part of the bill. That's what encompasses the amendments to the sections and any other provisions. There's both codified sections and non-codified sections. And the non-codified sections, fortunately, there's an appendix, and it's always hard to determine what order do you put these non-codified sections in, because there's a lot of them, and you can see what they are, like coordination instructions and savings clauses and effective dates. They go in order of this list here on the bill drafting manual, but more importantly, there is a great appendix, an Appendix P, and it's just a horrible bill. It's a big, big bill, and it has everything. It's not really a bill that could have ever happened because it has everything under the sun in it. But so if you're looking for an example, plagiarism is a beautiful thing. Look at that example and figure out what order to put things in and how you go about putting one of those clauses in. I'll really touch quickly on effective dates. The Montana Code Annotated actually has default effective dates. And that happened because once we had a special session, because House Bill 2 didn't have an effective date in it. So the legislature thought it would be a great idea to make a default effective date. So that way, if they get out of here, they don't have to come back a few days later to repass what they just passed. So the default
comment on that. I was here for that, and the legislature was so appreciative that mistake was made when they had to come back in the fall after House Bill 2 passed. So that's why definitely we put it in statute so it would never be a problem ever again.
Thank goodness for that, because none of us want to come back here after that special session. That would be just like, oh, I don't know if you'd even catch me. Anyway, so we do have default dates. Most of the time, your general legislation is October 1st. The code section, if you're really curious, is 1-2-201. So it's way up in the front of the titles, so no one will forget about it. But anyway, October 1st is the default effective date. Appropriation bills are going to be July 1st because the fiscal year starts on July 1st. And then to really round it off, if it's dealing with motor vehicle laws that are imposing fees, that's January 1st. But because of these various dates, usually it's always a good idea just to put a date in there. It doesn't matter if it normally becomes effective on October 1. We're not going to be upset if you put an October 1 date in there. I had a motor vehicle bill once and I was trying to codify it and it had both fees and not fees and no effective date. So I had no idea what to do. I mean, so it's always good to put the dates in there. Other than that, you can do immediate effective dates. The issue that comes up a lot in tax where you want to give a tax benefit immediately and you make it retroactively applicable as well. But a lot of times in most of your agency drafts, October 1st works good because it gives the agency time to ramp up the program and get things going and look at any rules that they have to do. And we are really going as far as time here, Todd. So I think I'll turn it over.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the tools of the trade and drafting aids, and Jarrett's kind of touched on some of those, but just overall, the first law of morality in bill drafting is to think clearly. The second law of morality in bill drafting is, as Jarrett said, plagiarism is a beautiful thing. I'm going to emphasize it. So beautiful. And the reason it's so beautiful is I can attest, and I hate having to refer how long I've been here, but over my 31 years, there is no new idea. No new idea. And that all those great ideas that have happened in the past get recycled over time. So if that's the case, and we're going to show you the tools to get at it, and our website is one of them, we have existing bills dating back on the web to 1999 of all those great ideas that are out there. And you can use that as a starting point. We also have existing statutes that you can take a look at. So for example, every single session, the legislature or the administration wants to create more boards, more commissions, and yeah, there's no red tape in that. We have statutes replete with examples on how to do that. So if you have a bill draft in that you're creating another board, another commission, go to the statutes and we'll show you how to look that up in folios. The other thing, and we'll also touch on the website and laws. You can search by subject area, for bill drafts, word choice, that kind of thing, to get at those old bill drafts. There are also laws from other states that we sometimes use, for other ideas. I would caution you, we have some of the best drafted laws in the United States in Montana because we converted over to plain use of language a long time ago, back in the 80s. And we constantly are cleaning up the statutes for archaic language. Other states, not so much. Very archaic in the terminology, hard to understand. So just use other state statutes, as a caution, but you still have a baseline, again, for plagiarism. The other thing that we use is, the current session. We have lots of bill drafts that sometimes look strangely the same on a particular subject. And as bill drafters, we'll pluck those bill drafts and our system will allow us to copy them and as a starting point for a new bill draft and draft them up in the system. So again, all that is to say is make your life easier. You know, there's no copyright on any of this stuff. And we encourage you to utilize these resources because it'll make your life extremely simple. And then also, Jared talked about it. Appendix P is absolutely awesome in terms of knowing where to place sections and how to place them. And then we also have a number of appendices with sample bill draft types. You know, whether it's rulemaking authority, you know, that kind of thing. The bill drafting manual has a lot of different samples that again you can plagiarize off of, which will be helpful. And then you always have us to fall back on in terms of this stuff. So those are kind of the tools of the trade. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and if there isn't any questions at this point, what we have that scheduled? Be back at 2:40. We'll just take a little break right now. Thanks.
We have 1 minute.
I'm ready.
Go for it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Susan Murray. I am the project manager and the business analyst who is assigned to work on the bill drafting system. Here in Legislative Services, we have a bill drafting system that looks somewhat similar to what you guys are going to use, but it's not exactly the same. And I'm responsible for that. And I'm lucky enough to talk with all the attorneys and drafters every day. So
She's wonderful, by the way.
thank you. You guys probably, if you were here in 2018, you know Jim Gordon, who was our WordPerfect guru, our Oracle guru. He has sadly retired, and I can do most of what he could talk about, but not everything. So hopefully I'll be good on all these pieces. We're going to start with the bill drafting macro in this part. And I want to call out a couple things to you. If you have not downloaded the bill drafting macro yet, you need to do it from the Edge internet browser instead of Chrome, because Chrome has some security around it that blocks that macro being downloaded. So if you've had that problem, use Edge. And I want to show you where the bill drafting macro is located because it's different. If you're on the home page and you scroll all the way down oh, why is it not scrolling down? Yeah, but it's not going. Let me stop and reshare. Give me a second. Okay. Let's see if this one works. Oh, there it goes. Good job. Sometimes I have to give myself a pat on the back. Info for legislators down here in the footer of the website, and it's really small. Bill drafting information is where you are going to look for now for information on drafting bills. And this applies to agencies as well as legislators. So that's why I'm kind of calling your attention to this. If you scroll all the way down to for state agency use, there is the user guide, which is really helpful. I recommend you download that first before you do anything else. But if you have not used the template yet this season, let me just show you really quickly how to do that, because it is a little bit tricky. If you right click on template and save that link as wherever you want to put it, you're going to get this downloads box up at the top, and it says it can't download it securely, but that's because it has a .dotm because it's a macro. So that is okay. It does work, and it does go to your downloads folder. So let me go to my downloads folder. Whoops. And it looks like this. It's called unconfirmed because, again, it's not working with the security that Edge uses and that Chrome uses. But that is it. So that's the first piece. I've got it into my computer. Now I am going to open Word. Give me a second. It's no, thank you. Okay, so basically you're gonna go and open this download from your Microsoft Word. You have to open that download every time you are going into drafting so that you can activate the macro that's working. So if you open a draft at any other time, you need to make sure you go back and reopen this to kind of wake it up. In the user manual are instructions for how to make a button for your quick access toolbar to make the macro work. That's tricky, and so I'm not going to go into that, but if you have questions, you can always ask us. But when I am ready to start drafting, so you can see I have like a template that's prompting me right here. And I'm going to start by amending a section. So again, I have this button up here in the top quick access toolbar. When I click on that scales, it will bring up a bill drafting menu. And then that gives me all of the macros for the different kinds of sections that we use in drafting. So I'm going to choose to amend an MCA section. So I click that radio button and I click OK. It will bring up a prompt to ask me which section I want to amend. So I enter a MCA section and I click OK. Oh, that was the wrong one. Shoot. Hold on. Let me do another one. No. So I'm just guessing. We're going to do it when I know is real. Okay. So 11101. You can see I entered it. It worked. It brought up that section, and then it brings me back to this box. I don't have anything else I want to amend at this point, so I'm just going to click cancel and get rid of that box for now, and then I can start working. For those of you, again, from agencies, the way that we indicate that something is being removed or inserted is to use the striking or the underlining buttons. So if I want to get rid of the word solemn, I would highlight it and strike it through. And then if I wanted to add something, I use the underline function and turn that on. Again, your version of the bill, the agency version of the bill always has to come to legislative services to be drafted. And so this indicates to us that you're striking or inserting in that section. Do you want to talk about track changes now? I know we had a request from an agency to use track changes to indicate that something has been stricken through or inserted. And because we are copying and pasting, that does work. And so it should work perfectly fine for you to go ahead and use track changes in these sections if that's how you want to indicate to each other that this is how you're doing it. So go ahead.
Just one quick comment on that. So track changes, I think, would work well. The thing that you have to remember is only use track changes when you're amending an existing MCA section, because that's what we're using for the showing, the strikes and the new matter. If you're doing a new section or housekeeping section or a title or any other section, please try to remember to turn off track changes. But that's all I'd have to add. I think it would help out a lot of agencies.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to go through a couple of the other kind of quirks about this macro, just so you're aware of them. Again, anytime you are ready to insert a new section, you want to make sure your cursor is in the right place. So I went back to the menu and I clicked the scales, and then I can insert something new. Okay, so same functionalities we saw before. I've entered a section that I want to repeal, and I click OK. And then I get that box again in case I want to continue to repeal things. But for this time, I don't actually want to, so I'm going to click cancel again. So that brought in the repealer. Here's the section that I entered. And it also brings in, for your convenience, all of the internal references to that section. Jared talked about that a little bit before, and you'll talk about it more in the folio section. But basically, these all need to be checked to make sure that you're repealing that section doesn't affect other sections as well. So those are this menu for your macro is the biggest piece that I really wanted to emphasize for you. This is, I mean, it says 2013. This system has been working really well for a long time. So we usually know the tricks. If something comes up that doesn't work for you, please let us know so that we can help out with that. Jarrett, was there anything else on this macro that we should show right now?
No, I think you did great.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing is just when you're inserting stuff in the title and making sure your cursor
Oh yeah, I was
placement
going
is
to show it
correct.
to the title. Yes. So here's the title. You want to make sure, again, see how we're repealing section 15.1.101 was inserted automatically. There are pieces of the macro that insert language automatically. So those are there. And then the last thing you would do is your title, which would say, whoops, my cursor was in the wrong place. So see, you want to make sure your cursor's in the right place. So I've updated the title, and that's the last thing you do because you want to make sure that title really summarizes what you're working on.
You want to show them how to do the amended sections macro into the title, just real quick.
Yes. Well, when I did amend, you know what? When I did amend MC, I did amend MCA. It did not update the title.
Yeah.
That's a
I
good
think
point.
maybe is the bottom one MCA and title, the bottom right
Oh,
there.
thank you. I was like, that is weird. See, that's something Jim would have known. Okay, so use the scales, and then again, you want to update the MCA in the title. It will pull in all those sections. There are definitely pieces where our build draft editor is different, and that's one of them. Yes.
Could I jump in real quick?
course.
One thing that I found is really useful, particularly with the amending sections and also with what Jarrett was mentioning about the track changes. I found it really helpful to get all of the sections that you are going to amend added in, do your changes, and then if there are other sections, new sections, you can turn track changes off, kind of compartmentalizing the work that needs to be done with track changes versus the work that needs to be done without track changes. If you try and add a new section with track changes on, it adds the whole thing. You can just accept those changes or something like that. But I found that to be a kind of a useful programmatic method for getting through those.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And again, with that amend section macro or amend MCA, you can continue to bring in sections in a row like that and just continue to add them. So that's a great tip.
I think the only thing else that I'd add is we went through that appendix in the bill drafting manual with all those housekeeping sections. It's beautiful because this is already plagiarizing for you. So if you have housekeeping sections, you just click it and you can add as many housekeeping sections.
Do you want me to bring a severability?
Sure.
That one has the most impressive language, I think. So I chose the severability macro, and it brings in all of that language for you automatically. So you can tinker with it, but you don't have to recreate it from scratch. Okay. So that's the bill drafting macro. Again, it's available at the bottom of the website so that you guys can find it and use it. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go into Folio, and this is probably one of my most exciting things ever. I love Folio. I don't know, it's a show of hands, if anyone in here would be willing to show me if you use Folio or not in your agency. So we got about half. Folio is amazing. I know it's older technology. It was around back probably 15 years ago in CD-ROM format, but we were lucky enough to have developers that went in and developed some custom macros for us to use in Folio. And we're far from done with Folio. We have visions for what we're going to do in the future with Folio as well. But long story short, we're trying to get it to where there'll be a format online so people that use Apples will have access, because right now it's just a Windows-based product. We also have been demoing a new Folio product, and then if I have enough time at the end, I'm going to show you what we're going to provide for no charge to people as well, which includes Montana Supreme Court cases, links to the cases, and links to session law, so you don't have to try to digest what the legislature did in whatever amendment that they did. So it'd be more easy to understand than our codification notes.
I just want to make a sales pitch for Folios, and I have to do it because it has changed our lives. We had Folios around when I was a young lad, way back when, but the efficiencies of using this program in bill drafting, answering any questions, from legislators, it's annotated. The search function is amazing. Yeah, I just want to say that it will save you so much time in so many areas that you deal with. So
great. Well, and I've talked about Folio too much, so we ought to be careful not to overemphasize, but this is a great product. You should definitely get it. So that being said, what does Folio do and what does the MCA do on Folio? If you're familiar with the annotations, that's the publication that we put out every other year, and it has the case notes in it. It has all the amendment notes in it for what happened to a particular code section. If there was more than one code section that amended a section, it says what happened and how those two code sections were put together when we put everything together. There's information showing what attorney general opinions are out there regarding a section, what administrative rules are out there, collateral references. These are things that our office works on in the legal services office when we're not busy drafting legislation, stuff that we work on during the interim. We have a big publication role. And so when we do the books, the hard copy books of the annotations, which you may not get in your agencies, it's a separate volume, big volume of books that has all of the cases in it, all the case notes, sorry, and all of that material, but it's quite large. And it's, it doesn't have the code sections in it. What Folio does is it integrates both the code sections and the annotations into one file. And we have an ability to search each one of those elements, which I'm going to show you, in addition to the code sections. And so I get calls all the time from members of the public, and I'm not able to give legal advice, but I can find some of the most obscure stuff in the MCA within about 2 minutes because of the Folio. It's just amazing what it does. And so I'm going to go through a quick hypothetical here. For your reference, if you really dig into this, I know one person in the room that really digs into Folio a lot. He could look at page 27 to 31. There's a lot of special search techniques in Folio that you can do, Boolean searches, all kinds of fancy stuff. Since this is just an intro course, we're not going to get into that, but there is a nice cheat sheet on page 30 of your materials. And that's really probably the best place to look if you ever do decide to use Folio. The biggest thing I can tell you about Folio, and my boss, when I first started, Greg Pettish, he's like, oh yeah, there's Folio is great. And then he said, there's a search. And then I was searching down here forever on this bottom search. Just forget that bottom search bar even exists. That bottom search bar has a few things that might help you out, but for the most part, it's just going to get you in trouble. What you want to use is go up to the search menu. And this is what our developers developed back in the day, the MCA search. And what this does is it gives us the ability to search all those elements that I talked about. Now, I'm just going to go through an example of how you would use this in bill drafting. And it's really, let's just say I have a bill draft request. I know nothing about livestock, but this is something dealing with the Board of Livestock. So I want to search everywhere in the entire MCA for Board of Livestock. So I'm going to put in quotes, and this is one of those things that's talked about in those search terms. Quotes is a pretty easy search term. It's just going to only find the stuff that you have in quotes. So I'm going to go Board of Livestock. My computer catches up. And I can put this in quotes, or I don't have to, but I'm just going to leave it like that. You don't have to have an in quote and folio, but that doesn't really matter. But if you look in the statistics here, it's telling me that, hey, there's 43,685 Montana Code sections. Out of those, the term board was found 14,493 times, the term of, my gosh, it's a big number, and livestock 1,916. Combines all that data and says that after all that, your criteria is 14 statutes in the MCA that have that criteria. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to find that the Board of Livestock shows up first in Title II. There's this nice search bar at the bottom. And here, Board of Livestock is mentioned one time. This one goes through each time it's referenced. If I click this left one here, if I want to go just from statute to statute, I can click here on this lower one, if you can see it here with my right in the bottom here. So anyway, I can go through and you can see the Board of Livestock is showing up everywhere in MCA, but it looks like we're getting pretty heavy in Title 81 with Board of Livestock stuff. Board means the Board of Livestock. Okay, we're rocking now. So whatever I'm going to do with the Board of Livestock, I know that if I change the name Board of Livestock, I'm going to have to probably amend my draft to change it in those various locations as well. So let's assume that I want to do something in Title 81. We want to call this a commission instead of a board because everyone likes commissions, right? So we'll go to Title 81. All the titles are off to the left. And what Folio does is it allows you to search you can really narrow your search. So 81 deals with the Board of Livestock. Let's assume we should probably say if we have a bill draft that wants to take and change the Board of Livestock to the commission, I'm going to look and see if there's a general definition. Those are usually right at the beginning of a title. And it says here, and of course that search showed up, Board of Livestock. Board means the Board of Livestock provided in. So if I want to change this term to Commission of Livestock, and this entire, if that's what they want to rename this, the commission, then I'm going to have to obviously change this definition here. But since I'm dealing with, as used in this title, I want to find everywhere where the Board of Livestock is now referred to as board. What I can do is I can just select here off to the left, where I'm selecting that, the Title 81, because we're dealing with Title 81 here. And I can do search. Remember, do not do the bottom search. It's not going to do good for you. Do the MCA search. And it's going to have this little balloon that shows up that says, hey, do you want to search the checked branches? Whenever you're doing a search, you want to make sure that this is either checked or not checked. If you want to search the whole MCA, make sure it's unchecked. If it's checked, it means you selected something over here. We're going to type in the term. I'm going to type in a couple different terms. I'm going to type in board, and I'm going to use an asterisk, which is a wild card. And it looks like I pick up 103 areas where board is used if I don't use a wild card, and I pick up 111 if it is used. Sometimes you have situations where there's like an S or something along those lines. You want to make sure you catch everything that's there. If I hit OK, it's going to go through, and I can go through and check every single place in the MCA that the term board is utilized. So I'd have to change every one of those to commission. I actually had that happen when they renamed the State Tax Appeal Board. And I found various instances how State Tax Appeal Board was called various things and had to rename it in all those sections. It was a really boring bill draft, but it renamed it to the Montana Tax Appeal Board, and we had to catch everywhere so we didn't have bad law. If you're repealing the Board of Livestock, this would be a bad example, but let's assume you just want to get rid of the Board of Livestock. Then you're going to have to go through and repeal every one of these code sections that's mentioning the Board of Livestock, or at least those codes, anything that's relevant. This is where you'd have to get into reading the code sections, but to get to those particular elements. I'm going to show you, we talked a little bit about what case law was. I'm just going to show you each one of these has underneath it. I'm going to get to one that's a little bit more familiar territory. We'll go into taxation. This is where most of the good stuff is. So this is adjusted gross income, a huge concept. I know there's going to be cases up the wazoo here. This code section is amended so many times. It's just, my gosh, you look at the history of this thing. That's every time it's been amended. Every section, they love to amend this thing like 10 times. And then we have to put it all together when we're codifying it. But these are the compiler's comments I was talking about. So if you want to find out what happened to a specific code section, you can just pretty much get an idea of reading these compiler's comments. What we're working on is a macro where you can just click on this and actually go to the session law itself. And you can, so you won't have to try to, we deal with this after the session, trying to, summarize all this stuff, but this will actually enable you to open up that bill and see exactly that code section and how it amended it. So we think that's going to be huge. But as you can see in here, you have cross references. These are all part of what would be in the annotations and that are not in the books. So it marries those two together. Administrative rules. Look at that. Department of Revenue had some rules dealing with adjusted gross income. Go figure. A lot of rules, but I can figure out where those are. New for this next go around too, we're working on a tool that will actually provide a link to the ARM. So you can open up the ARM in Folio. And then if you want to make sure that it's current law, we have a hyperlink back that will open it to the Secretary of State's website. And I'm really hoping it's going to be in this next release. We have our IT staff working on it like crazy. Here's a case note. We go through during the interim and we annotate every single case. And they go back a long time. This has been happening for a long time. I mean, here's a 50s case, but you can find them going way back. The new macro that we're working on is going to actually put all the cases on Folio, so you can click on the site and it will open up the Montana Supreme Court case absolutely free of charge, and you'll have the actual case itself. Part of our goal is to get to where we don't have to talk as much in the case note about what's going on. You can click on it, you can get the case yourself, and you can go on with your work. I'm going to show you what that will look like. There's the developer, I won't say his name, but I keep telling him how great he's doing and hoping that he gets it out this next release, which is mid-October. Let's see. Oh, I got to turn this off here. I have to clear my search list, I think. Should have demoed this before. I'm just going to show you what the Supreme Court cases will look like. So I've been saving Supreme Court cases since I got here. I go back to 2006. I would like to go back further, but we have every single Supreme Court case saved from there until now. These will hyperlink in there, and so you'll be able to get those. If you want to do a search inside the Supreme Court case, you would just simply click there. You could search the Supreme Court case. If you want to search all Supreme Court cases, like I could, this is where the, sorry, my screen looks different than that. You could type in something fun like tortfeasor down here, and we will work probably more on these elements as we get this product working. But so the term tortfeasor shows up 50 times in those cases. So I think it's going to be a great free tool for agencies and for everyone else. Do you want me to demo anything else? You want to move on?
I was going to say, I mean, the excitement of annotations and codification, I know you guys now want to work with us or for us, on all this stuff, but this is the stuff that gets us going in terms of bill drafting. And so that makes us really weird.
Hey, so here's like the ARM they're demoing though. You can click there, we have the same thing. It's going to be online, so you can peruse this when you're out in the wilderness without internet too. You could do that and bill draft when you're in the wilderness. But if you click here and you're not in the wilderness, it will actually open up that rule, and then you can actually see that it's current law by looking at that. So. I'm sorry, that didn't open up because I didn't share screen, and I see that I'm probably out of my time. So we'll end my enthusiasm on Folio. But
Jarrett, if I could jump in really quick, we use this at Revenue a lot. This is not only a great tool for bill drafting, it's an incredible tool for litigation. It's an incredible tool for memorandums, opinions, everything else. It's really a work of art, and your IT staff, all the work that you guys do, it's very much appreciated by the state attorneys.
thank you, Tony. And I almost missed the most important thing of Folio because I got so excited about the new stuff. But for bill drafting purposes, when you're amending a statute and you want to check all those subsection references or all those repeals, the simple term you just put in is the code section that you amended. So if you amended 1510-420, You type that in the search function and you'd find 127 times that 1510.420 was used, and you get to go through each one of those code sections and see if you've had any issues with it.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. I am going to go back to the website. So let me share my screen again. We're going to talk a little bit about the website and how you can use that in bill drafting. So give me a second. Okay. So again, I'm at legmt.gov. That is our website. And the first few things I'm going to talk about are on the website, again, all the way down at the bottom under bill drafting information. And there are other important things there for you to look at, as well as the bill macro. And there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight for today. Under drafting bills, this 2021 bill summary is one of the pieces that we find really useful. This summarizes all the legislation, again, using research analysts work and drafters and attorneys to look at those. I'm going to click on one and you can see there is tons of information about legislation that affects K-12 education. And we have those for many topic areas. So there's tax, transportation, etc. So this is a great place to look if you're looking for a summary. Again, going back to the bill drafting page, there is one for 2019 as well. And that was done in more of a chunked style, so it's all in one PDF. So there is that one as well, but you can search that. And one other piece I wanted to show you guys are the 5-session bill summaries. If you click on those, it is our obligation to provide 5-session bill summaries for legislators who are interested. And the documents are here and available for you to search as well. Those are by subject area. And so if you click on it, you can get a summary of, we call them primers, for all of the information in the past 5 sessions that refer to that, in this particular instance, the MAPA, the Administrative Procedure Act. So we update those every interim. That's part of Legislative Services' job to go through and update those and provide new summaries and post them. So that helps you get a quick update on what you're looking for on a given subject. One of the other things that we use here in Legislative Services, and it's off of our website, is the law. We call it the laws website. So if you click on laws and bills and go to 2023 session bill lookup, it will open a new window for you. And this is a really robust searching tool to help you find bills that are, again, written on a particular topic, or maybe were offered by a certain legislator. As session goes on, you can use this top part to search LC numbers, the bills as they come through, as well as, by the time we get to codification, the chapter numbers as well. But I want to show you a couple different things about this site. Just know, and don't be startled, if you've used laws for a while, we have switched to the 2023 session on this website. It's the current session. But if you're looking for bills, you may want to go back and look at bills from other sessions. So this drop down here lists all of the sessions since we've had this website. So since 1999, that includes special sessions as well. And it will bring up this same page. I'm going to go to 2021 for that session. So now I am searching in the 2021 session. And you can always confirm what you are looking at by checking the session up here in the URL. So that tells me I'm in the 2021 session. And if you need to go back to the back to a previous session, Jim Gordon again always used to say you click on the capital to go home. And so that will take you home from anywhere. Then you can get back to that drop down to navigate back. So I'm going to start by showing you what current bill information we have. So again, this is for the 2023 session. There are no introduced bills yet. I find this search, I went to the introduced and unintroduced bills. I find this one to be really useful to kind of be able to group things, to see all of the different bills that have currently been requested. These are not all the bills that will be requested, but these are the ones that have been requested so far. Todd gets here very early in the morning to assign out those bill drafts and get them up on the website. And you can see the committees who have requested bills, as well as this happens to be a set that were requested by Senator Hertz. So you can use this really basic search to get good information. And if you come to this page and you're interested in getting a little bit more information, you can click on the bill draft request and get any pieces of information, including the status of the bill, the subjects of the bill, and the requester and who the drafter is. Oh, Jarrett, look at that. I clicked on one for you. How lucky. This isn't as useful, again, at this point in the session because we haven't introduced any of these bills and they haven't worked through our regular processes. So I'm going to go back to 2021 so we can take a look at something a little more impressive, maybe. So again, I click on the capital to go home. And then I'm going to choose the 2021 session. And I'm going to look up bill information. And again, I'm going to go to list all introduced and unintroduced bills right now, just to see the whole list. And again, these are final statuses of all of these bills, but there are, you know, I can't even tell you, I think we were at 3,000 bills last session. So there's an enormous list. And I want to show you a couple different things. So again, let's go to House Bill 6. And here are all the statuses of the bill, including the dates that hearings were held, executive action was taken on this bill. And if there is a speaker icon, that means you can hear the audio for that action as well, or go to our website, to our SLIC website to see that. Again, it includes the requester and any subjects for that bill and any additional information, including whether a fiscal note is currently probable or not. So that's really important to know. And this, again, this website gives you a wealth of information. One of the other things it does for you is give you the current bill text. And that can sometimes be important to look at. So I am going to look at a previous version of the bill, and I'm going to go to, this is the bill that as it was introduced. And then if you have the interest, or this is your subject matter, you can go through all the versions of the bill to see what changed in between versions. So sometimes that's important for you to look at and to know about. So that is one particular bill. I want to show one other piece real quick. Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of, you know, the plagiarism part and the copy and paste part, you want to bring up the HTML?
Yes, I will.
On that. So you guys want to draft another House Bill 6, and which I don't recommend, but you can go in and, you know, copy, you know, the new section language in that and paste it into your bill draft. Is
Yep.
correct?
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Just one, the HTML doesn't play well with numbers, which is why the
No.
dollar figures, but this is not an actual amendment of a section. It's non-codified. So it works better in MCA sections.
Yeah, it does. It does. So, yeah, these are the ways you can copy and paste from there. If you copy and paste from a PDF, I'm sure you all know, but it's really unfriendly sometimes with, especially with new drafts with with line numbers, it'll copy those in and it's just a pain. So, but this is an introduced bill, so it would be fine. So that is a specific bill and how to look at information about that. We try to include as much information here about the bill as possible, including whether or not amendments were provided to that bill. So this is the way we did amendments last session in 2021. This session, we're moving toward providing amendments in context. So it'll be slightly easier to use. And I wanted to show one other piece. Again, I'm going to go back to that main screen. And one of the things that's really nice here is the laws instructional video library. So if you have this technical savvy to go in and learn how to use preference lists or other additional information, this video library will help you kind of explore that and figure out how to do those things. But if not, you can always call us, and again, we'll help out with that as well. I think those are all my pieces.
Thanks, Susan.
Yep.
We're doing good on time. I'm gonna be going over pages 32 through 34 of the handouts, and I want to talk to you about the logistics of bill draft request limits and deadlines and introduction style deadlines, especially as it relates to pre-introduction. And I mentioned this early on, in terms of our relationship with you guys, in terms of your bill drafts, but I want to talk a little bit more how your bill drafts that are coming in at the front end of kind of our process, and we're trying to offload your bill drafts as quickly as possible and get them in and get them pre-introduced. And that also allows the legislature to be up and running and dealing with your bill drafts right off the bat the first week of the session. And I would tell you that although that sounds scary, because they'll probably they'll have a little bit more time to kind of evaluate the bills, that kind of thing. But you getting your bills up in front of them in the first part of the session is huge, because you're not dealing with all the transmittal issues that all the other bills are coming in later and they get squeezed. So I would advocate that it really helps you out. But again, in order to get those in front of the legislature, you've got to meet our pre-introduction deadlines. And the pre-introduction deadline, like I said, is December 15th. And what will happen is you are responsible for getting your sponsor, a legislator, to carry your piece of legislation. And the pre-introduction form, Appendix S, is the form that they have to sign off on. Again, by December 15th, get it into us by 5 p.m. And then it'll go through our process. It'll be assigned a bill number and pre-introduced. You'll get, the drafter and our bill processing folks will get a list of the agency contact people that when we generate when the bill has been drafted and is ready for pre-introduction, there'll be a form that goes out to the agency contact person with this form. You've got to, scan it, whatever you do to get it to the legislator who's going to sponsor your legislation, have them sign it, and then make sure that they send it back into us. And they can do that again, fax. They can sign and scan it and email it, back to us. Kind of a big deal, because what invariably happens is you'll have a legislator that may be in Tahiti, for Christmas, and you guys are scrambling to try to get a hold of them, and you usually end up contacting us, and then we will try to assist you, because it's in our best interests that they get that back in and signed and pre-introduced, because if they don't, then the whole bill draft is canceled. And then what happens is you have to ask a legislator to use one of their own requests to put that back in the hopper, and then it has to go through our entire flow chart process. We have to re-edit it, the whole 9 yards, and it's just a pain in the rear end for everybody. So we'll be there to try to help you, because we have a vested interest. We've already drafted it. We don't want to deal with it again if we can possibly help it. The other thing that happens is if it is canceled and then you do get a legislator to put it in the hopper, there won't be a buy request line on the agency. Some things to think about, in that scenario, and then also for bill drafts that you might not have gotten through an interim committee, some approval for drafting. The workaround on that is to get a legislator to request a bill draft request on your behalf to get it drafted. They have up until December 5th to request an unlimited amount of bills. So you guys want to key in on that date, because after that, individual legislator can only request 7 bill draft requests, and they will guard those requests with their lives, and they won't waste them on agency bills, because that's all they have left. So if you find yourself in a scenario, either where you can't get someone to sign off and sponsor, the bill by the December 15th deadline, or you want to still bring forward legislation that wasn't passed by an interim committee, you got to contact the legislator to put that request in before 5 p.m. on December 5th, because they have an unlimited amount that they can request up to that point. So just want you to be aware of that, to kind of help you out. Prioritizing bill drafts. We told you that we really want to front end load your bill drafts, and if at all possible, get the language into us, before the elections occur. Because if you take a look at page 33, prioritizing bill drafts, we give you guys priority in the drafting process if the bill draft language, specific language, is received by November 15th. If we haven't received the specific language of the bill draft, you lose your priority status. And by that time, we have the flood of almost 3,000 bill draft requests that have come in after the election, and you're pretty much out of luck in terms of getting that, and you'll have to get a legislator to request that bill draft again to get it into the session. So I just want to point that out. I think that's it in terms of stuff. So Any questions that you guys have regarding anything? Well, thank you. We hope that this was helpful. And if you need anything, you've got our contact information. Again, we're here to help you guys out, and you guys are also here to help us out. So.
I just wanted to say thank you as well. It's great to have agencies working on drafts, and I always really appreciate agency drafts. But besides that, I also wanted to mention the evaluations for those of you that are here. I think part of getting bar credit is we had to have evaluations. Of course, we will always look at them as well. You can take the last page off if you're here, if you decide to do it and leave it, or you can deadhead it to us if you're off site on Zoom, or you could email it as well, or whatever works, or don't worry about it because it's Friday afternoon, but you didn't hear that at the bar.
Okay, thank you so much, guys.